G'day everybody, and for those who have come in late, you're listening to Expand the Phantom Podcast.
He washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck, and upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die. The Phantom! The ghost who walks. The Phantom. Enemies beware. The Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds
Hello,
you.
we are the Chronicle Chamber team, and this is Expand the Phantom Podcast. Our website is chroniclechamber.com, and you can contact us via our email, which is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. You can also subscribe to us via YouTube, iTunes, or the various Android apps. You would think after 200 odd episodes I would get that right, but I haven't. How are you, Stephen?
I'm good, mate. And if people have been listening to us for the last 200 episodes, they'll know that you have a wonderful way with words and pronunciations.
Yes. So 200 episodes, Steve.
How many did you do the math and how many I've actually been on? Or Dan, you've been on what, 199, I guess.
I think
There's not many that you missed.
2 that I've missed, maybe 3, because I think there was so we'll say 190 odd. But yeah, I think you joined us in around episode 20, 30?
Could have been. I thought it was earlier, but I can't remember.
Yeah, you might be right. And then Dan was in the 40s, I believe. So, yeah. So thank you, everyone, for listening to us. Dan cannot be here tonight. He had his daughter had a football game on today, and they won the grand final.
Just a football game. It was a grand final. Ramp it up. He's not just missing. He's not missing a big episode like this for just a mere football game.
Yes.
Sort of best on ground for the grand final.
Yeah, and he'll probably be best on ground for the after party after the grand final as well. So shout out to Dan and all our listeners. So this is going to be a bit of a party episode. What we've done is we've got not 1, not 2, but 3 special guests. And then we've put it all out to our Patreons. And then we've got, what have we got? We've got about 8 Patreons that have joined us as well. So a huge thanks to all our Patreons. Without you, we couldn't do half of what we do. So what we'll do first, Stephen, I think we'll quickly introduce our special guests. And then we'll say hi to our Patreons. And then we're going to let the Patreons ask the questions as to Tony, Mike, and Jeff. So, Tony, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Yeah, now that I'm connected and glad to be here.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. It's nice and early for yourself.
It's morning. It's not too early, but
that's good.
Yeah, he's got sunlight out there at least, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. We get it an hour before you do, Jeff.
So it's still dark for you, Jeff.
Yeah, it's getting there. I can actually see outside now, so it's getting lighter.
I was just wondering, are those windows behind you there, Jeff? So as this podcast goes on, we'll see the windows light up.
I imagine so.
Awesome.
That's how we're going to keep track of time.
Yeah. I remember we did a podcast with Tony, I think, once, and he started off with like complete darkness. And then by the end of the podcast, it was like mid-morning, and it was...
That was in the winter too, I think.
Yeah. And the third special guest we have is Mike Manley. How you going, sir?
Hey, good. How are you guys?
Very good. Thank you for joining us.
Yep. I went to bed 3 hours ago, so I just took a nap basically.
That is, I'm sure that's true because I'm usually up by 6 and I'll check my email, and Mike filed his art like 2 hours before that. He files at 3 or 4 in the morning. So
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Yes. So along with Tony, Mike, and Jeff, we also have some Patreons. So Patreons, this is your chance to say hello. So we'll quickly rattle you off, and you can come say hi. Starting up the top, Chris. How you going, Chris Hill?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jermayn. Hello, all. Lovely to see you all. I'm based in Brisbane in the state of Queensland. That's on the east coast of Australia, up the top.
No worries. Daniel?
Hey fellas, I'm in Perth, in northern suburbs of Perth, about 40 minutes away from Jermayn.
Yeah, it's good to see another Perth guy here. And talking about an ex-Perth guy, Trevor, how are you, Trevor?
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Yes, I'd like to be back in Perth, but then again, it gets a bit hot nowadays with all the fires and things. And then when it doesn't, it's pissing down with rain. So I'm happy in Melbourne. It's just cold here.
I suppose in Melbourne you get to experience all 4 of those seasons in one day.
And it was beautiful today. It was 20 something or other, maybe 20 even.
No worries. Well, thank you for joining us. Sean, how are you, Sean?
Good, thanks, Jermayn. So I'm Sean. I live just outside of Melbourne in Victoria, so right down the south of Australia.
No worries. And then we've got one from Ankit from India. How are you, Ankit?
I'm doing well, and I'm really just really glad to be part of this. And I'm really honored, like being with the guys who've actually written this script, like from my childhood. Then Mr. Manley, like I've grown up reading your stuff in Batman and all, so it's a big honor for me. Yeah. So yeah, thank you guys.
Awesome. And then we have Duncan, the man of many talents. How are you, sir?
Hi, gents. I'm calling in from Melbourne, down the bottom of Australia as well. I want to thank Jeff, Mike, and Tony for making themselves available early in the morning for us, and all your listeners, and congratulate the Chronicle Chamber team on 200 episodes. Well done, guys.
Thanks, Duncan.
Thank you. And then we've got another Steve.
I think
still there.
He's checked out.
Disappeared.
He messaged me. He might be back. He might not.
Okay. Well, for a short period of time, we had Steve Siebert, who is also from Melbourne, who has joined us as well. But he said he might come in, might not. So now I haven't missed any other Patreons.
That's all on the screen at the moment.
That's all on the screen. So what we're going to do, guys, is basically just going to shoot off some questions to Tony, Mike, and Jeff, and then we're going to have a bit of a discussion, and we're just going to see where we go from there. See if we can pry any insight, knowledge, or information out of them, and stuff like that. Now we've got the first question. Chris, do you want to ask the first question? The first question, please.
That's actually not the first question, but okay.
That's all right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
A question for all of you, I guess, is I'm just interested in knowing how you work your day. Do you start like a traditional day and do a normal 8-hour shift? Or are you a lot more flexible with the way that you're able to work the stories? Or do you have to work harder when it gets closer to a deadline? So I was just most of us have jobs that are probably 9 to 5 or 8-hour days, but I just wondered what the flexibility might be for you.
I'll start on that. It's probably my schedule is a lot different from what Mike and Jeff do, because they need to be physically in one place to do their work. I can find, a lot of times I'm off doing something, ordinary. Might just be running errands or out on the motorcycle. And I kind of count that as writing time, because you often find that even subconsciously certain writing problems are sorting themselves out. When I'll actually sit down at the keyboard and get the material, onto a drive, that could be any time. That could be the middle of the night or the middle of the afternoon. It's whenever I have it available.
Do you keep like a little notepad or something beside you at all times, just to scribble ideas, or? Always.
But that's from my newspaper days. You always have a notebook and you always have a pen. And that's essential. Because you'll forget it. You'll have some brilliant idea, and 20 minutes later it's gone. So you have to write it down.
Sorry, Jeff, you were saying?
Yeah, as for me, my schedule, I'm very much a creature of habit, and so it's very 9 to 5 for me most days. I always sort of made sure that I did not have to pull all-nighters and things like that. So it's, all of my work is really done between 9 to 5. I might run over into an evening a little bit every once in a while, but usually that's on my iPad. So I'm just sitting in the living room and working. So I'm not at a drawing board or anything like that. But yeah, I keep a very sort of ordinary business hours sort of a schedule. I bet Mike's answer to this question is a lot different than mine, though, from the look of it.
Yeah. This job is like a sponge. It will just absorb all the time that you give to it. Because I'm not only just doing the Phantom, I'm doing Judge Parker. And sometimes I'm doing something else on top of that. Like I just did the 30th anniversary of Darkhawk. So I was doing 3 jobs at one time. So, and I also, because I work with my assistant, Liang, who helps me with the backgrounds. Now, she used to come over to the studio and used to sit like right there. But because of the pandemic, she wasn't traveling. I just saw her for the second time in the last year. Was it a weekend ago? She came over to visit. So what I do is I try to do the pages because I still draw the Phantom traditionally, and then I scan it and I send it to her, and she inks the backgrounds digitally, and then I finish it digitally when she comes back. So my job is I'm working on, and now with this pandemic thing, it's like, who cares what time of day it is? It's like the same. It's like Groundhog's Day, the movie. It's like every day is basically the same thing. And I think naturally I'm a night person. I've always been since I was a kid. So I found that over the years, even back before I was doing the strips, that during the day you have a lot of interruptions. You got to do this, you got to do that. You've got to eat. Sometimes I would be teaching. I would be teaching a class. Sometimes I was teaching, going to school to finish my degree and working. So I would get about 4 hours sleep during the week, and then on the weekends I would get I would catch up. So, and I'm just a workaholic. So I like working, even when I'm not working. I'm drawing because I just love to draw. I'm always drawing something. So
yeah, Mike. So your typical day is a 12 to 16-hour work day. Is that about right?
Yeah, easy. If I worked 8 hours, I would feel like I'm on vacation. Like yesterday, I got up because I had to turn in the Judge Parker strip. So I was up at 9. And I went to bed at 2 a.m.
And so were you just drawing that whole time?
I was drawing the whole day. I was drawing. Yeah. I was working all day.
Wow. You would have to love it to be able to keep doing that.
That's true. I mean, I think that's something that the other guys would agree with me, is that you have to really love it to do this for a living. And that's probably the thing that separates the professional from the amateur, because the amateur loves it, but then they now I want to go to the bar, or I want to go do something else. And you have to draw past the point of where the average person would go, like, okay, I know this even from teaching. Like I would teach a workshop on comics, right? And say it's 4 hours. 4 hours for the average non-professional sitting down drawing everyday thing is a lot of time for someone to sit down and to concentrate on drawing one particular thing, whether that's, painting a landscape or, drawing a cartoon thing in a cartoon class. 4 hours kind of like tops people out. They can't like really go beyond that. And usually, like, if we had a class that went all day, like sometimes I've taught a 6-hour class, everybody's smart at 9, 10, 11. After lunch, everybody's like, everybody's ready to go to sleep. Even like adults, right? Even like I have had interesting people. Like I had a guy that was like an airline traffic controller, and you figure like, oh, that's got to be a pretty stressful job. But after like, 3 hours, he was kind of like, the concentration falls off.
Oh, interesting.
There's a few questions here about the strip, which could probably roll into one. But before we go into that one, there's a question here from Trevor. Do you want to read it, Trev? Your first one.
Yeah, I was asking
in regards to Egmont.
I was thinking. I think Tony's probably said it somewhere else, but I was just curious from Tony about how he got his connection to Egmont to start doing stories for Team Phantom, which then led into obviously being in the right place at the right time, and obviously being good enough to then get the job with King to get to where we are, despite the little problem we had last year or the year before.
Well, it was, I had an introduction to an editor there who, I've tried to remember her name. Her first name was Lotta. I remember that, Lotta. I don't remember the last name, but I had an introduction to her from a friend who was in the comics business. I don't know what he wrote for Egmont or Semic in those days. But, I was in the newspaper business and had, my wife was home with the kids. They were young at that time, and I was looking to make some freelance work. So anyway, I had the introduction to this editor. Our conversations never went anywhere, but she introduced me to Ulf Granberg. And and after a few conversations with Ulf, he asked me to pitch some Phantom ideas, and he liked some of them and picked them up. And I guess that was around 1991 or 92 when I was talking with him. And I think maybe by 93, I was being published. So.
Okay. Can I just have a follow up to that is, so having done that, were you grounded in the Phantom, or was it a learning curve for you to find the history?
All I knew about the Phantom was the newspaper strips from when I was a kid. So I would have started reading it. I mean, even before I could read, it would have been 1958 or 59, I guess, when I started looking at the strip. I do remember vividly that, the visuals, that's what drew me in. It was the costume, just some kind of mystery about that. What is this thing, And so by the time I could really read them, I think that was probably on Cy Barry's watch. So that would have been, early. Did he come in the 1961 or so, I think? Yeah. But when I was able to read, then I was reading in the Cy Barry era. And, that was probably the only comic strip I read in the paper. I didn't care much about the gag a day strips or, they needed to have a story. I guess I remember reading, Steve Roper and Mike Nomad and things like that, because they also had a story too. But yeah, no, and then I don't remember ever seeing the Phantom in comic book form, though. I don't know if it just wasn't available where I grew up, but everything I knew about it, I knew just from reading it as a young kid.
And if I can indulge and just have one quick more. So if that's the story, so then talking to Ulf, were you pitching stories that were sort of way off base with even Phantoman lore, and he had to put you back in a line and say, yeah, can't do that. Nah, can't do that.
On occasion, that would happen. I guess I always felt, the Phantom, he's wearing these sidearms. Now, unless he's just playing dress up, which I don't think he is, I think he's got to use these sidearms now and again. And I remember one idea in particular that Ulf rejected. And he said, this is a murderous plan. So I started to get the parameters of how the Phantom would behave, you know. So no, Ulf was a real mentor to me, certainly. Yeah, I think most of what I know about the Phantom I learned from him.
Oh, very good. Following on from that, Daniel, I see your question there about Phantom Law. Do you want to follow up with that one?
I think that's partly been answered, but yes, has a story ever been rejected, or has Tony ever been asked to change a story to fall back in line with the tropes and the laws?
So in the strip more so than just with Egmont?
Yeah.
Never with King Features. No, I've never had a story synopsis rejected, and never even had one changed. Yeah, I think I had one caution on one story from Brendan Burford that I can recall, but it wasn't even really it wasn't as if I was going to take the story in a wrong direction. I think it was The College Kid. And it's a story about kind of a nerdy kid who he's kidnapped by criminals who want to use his programming expertise to steal money.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Phantom goes in there and rescues the kid, and then they're basically the story is the journey home. You know, the Phantom bringing this kid back to Mawatan. I think the caution on that was, don't make fun of this kid. That's what Brendan told me. Now, I never intended to make fun of the kid, but he said, you know, this kid is a nerd. This kid will probably be teased at school anyway. Don't give bullies a reason to tease nerds, you know, that type of thing. So it was kind of a superfluous suggestion, but I think that's really the only kind of adjustment I ever had from King in all these years. Usually they just say, we love what you're doing, keep it coming.
So you had to get rid of the titty twister scene?
Right. He did not get locked in his locker at school. So.
Back home, mate, just slam him in the locker. And that's it.
Yeah.
Well, the same question for Mike and Jeff. Does that happen often? Well, focusing on the Phantom, I guess, but does that happen often when you've put? And I'm just assuming here it wouldn't be a nice feeling either to have it rejected, or do you just you're open to the criticism and look at it as a time to learn with your work as well?
Well, I can say that King Features has never changed a single line of anything that I've done for them. I'm actually quite shocked at how hands-off they are. Really, you know, I just send the strips in every week, and I can't remember them ever reacting to anything that I sent in. They don't see any sketches or anything like that, but it's just like it's working for ghosts. It's really great.
I can see Mike nodding there. So same deal with you there?
I have never had to change anything on the Phantom, but I have had in the past to change things on Judge Parker. Now working, you know, for Marvel and DC was a completely different experience than working for King, because like Jeff said, it's like working for ghosts. So 99.9% of the time, the only time you hear anything from King Features is, where are the strips, right? But there was a brief time on Judge Parker where there was some features editor at the Washington Post who seemed to have a bug in their bonnet over the way that I depicted women in the strip. And they would say there was three instances, two with Nettie who was like the sexy 20-something-year-old girl. They did not like the fact that I was making her too hot. I was making her too hot, and I had to go back and basically I had to make the sweater not so clingy, you know.
Yeah.
And then I remember so the way it was is our late editor, I mean, she's still alive, but our old, who's since retired, Evelyn, would say, like, they can't force you to do it. So they would ask you to do it. Can you make this change? Okay, you know, and it was only for the Washington Post. So it wouldn't appear in any of the other strips or papers. It would just be for that one particular thing, because it's a big client and they didn't want to lose the big client. So I'd make a little change. But there was one, and there was another one where there was gunplay. And they're like, no, you can't have this. You know, you can't draw people with the guns and everything, which I had drawn previously in the strip. So it was very confusing. Like, well, but that doesn't make any sense because I've already drawn stuff that's more violent than this. And then there was another one where I think it was Abby, and they wanted me to, you know, perform a mastectomy basically on the side shot. And I just said, I'm not doing it. That one I wouldn't do. I said, that just doesn't make any, it would be a bad drawing to do that. So there was this one particular features editor who seemed to have a thing about the way that I depicted women, which is ironic because the fans of the strips are all about you drawing sexy women and constantly compare the size of the boobs from strip to strip. Well, she looks like an A cup today. Well, she was a D cup yesterday, and they're like very obsessed with it. So it's weird. The fans want sexy women. Never heard another complaint from any other paper except for that one couple of times. And this is like 6 or 7 years ago on the Washington Post. So on the Phantom, I've never had to change anything unless I made a spelling mistake. You know, you turn it in, you get an email from King Features that goes, got him. Same thing you get every week. And in fact, I don't know for Jeff, but when I load up the Sunday on their server, you would only know it if they said, hey, 2 weeks later, we're running this in the paper. Did you put that up? Because we didn't get it. So yeah, it's a very odd, it's completely different than working in comic books, because in comic books, you're constantly getting feedback because you're usually sending in batches of pages. You know, or you're sending them to the inker, or if you're not inking it or whatever, or you're inking stuff if they're sending you pencils. But with the strips, it's not like that. And I don't know if that's always been the way. But I used to talk to Al Williamson a lot about that. But yeah, I mean, and those guys used to physically deliver their stuff. Jeff and I just hit a button. You know.
That's very interesting because we've had podcasts with creators who have done stuff for Frew and Team Phantom, and they've had exactly the opposite experiences. Yeah, with King Features. So it's and I could see a few other puzzled fans looks on their faces as they're hearing how about that. I was just wondering, Tony. Sorry. Do you think that could be because, like, you know the Phantom more than probably anyone else at King Features, so they probably have that trust in you that if you've done it, it's probably okay because you've been doing it for so long and you're teaching them what the Phantom is and what the Phantom isn't?
I'm sorry, was it?
Sorry. Yeah, I was talking to you. Sorry.
I think I think the explanation is much simpler, and maybe because I come out of a newspaper background. But in Hearst feels, or King Features, part of Hearst feels very much at home to me. It feels like a newspaper culture, which means it's basically chaos. all day, and everyone's like dancing as fast as they can to get the work out the door. So, that's what I attribute it to, unless there's something that, some titanic problem that blows up on everybody and grinds the machine to a halt. That's the only time you're going to get any attention. So, yeah, I think that's the ghost of William Randolph Hearst, cranking out the work. Just keep cranking, Keep
because
dancing.
they produce what, like 50 something strips a day. So, and then we had three editors, right? There were three. They broke it up basically, like you might, one editor might get the soaps, one editor might get Heathcliff, one editor might get Prince Valiant. And there was like a head editor and then like 2 or 3 people underneath the head editor. And then they have people that deal with just like the web stuff. They have people in pagination or people in production who send out the PDFs. Like, we'll take my strips when I send them in, put them in the PDF, and then proof them. The one snag might be, I don't think they read the story before when Tony sends it in. I think they read the story and the strips at the same time and go, okay. Like, he tells them the story, the plot, but I don't think they're reading the individual strips until they proof it before it goes out to the client. So that's when they might say, you drew, and sometimes, you draw the tail or the pointer going to the wrong person, and Tony's very good with that, because I always send it to him when I send it to them. So he can look over it and go like, oh, yeah, you screwed it up again, Mike.
That's such a rare event.
Redraw it. We're tearing this one up.
So you're saying, Mike, that Tony is a harsher critic than some of the guys at King Features?
I would say he has the sharpest and the most important eye on the strip, because I had like a couple Don Newton issues of this Phantom. I had a couple Jim Apparel issues of the Phantom. I've seen, the Barry brothers. I've always admired their work, but I did not know any of the lore of the Phantom in the way that Tony does. So I am completely relying upon his expertise. They just started doing those really nice reprints. I don't know if you can, I don't know where they've been reprinting the Barry. So I've been buying the Barry years that they've been reprinting.
Right,
you're right. And then you guys helped me out some in the past too, because again, one of the things about the strip is it was never consistent. It's been consistently in the paper, but the strip was never consistent, and the artists were never consistent in the way that they depicted things. Like Garan, sometimes it's like really short, like mid-thigh, and then sometimes he's like chest high. Sometimes, like, I'm still never quite sure. When I do it for myself, I've said the Skull Cave entrance is so big, but if you read the strip, it's like really giant, and then sometimes it seems like it's like a little bit higher than the, like 10 feet, like a little bit higher than the average doorway. And so when you're going over the strip and you're looking, because you always look to the past for the answer for what you're doing now on a continuity strip, right? It was, and Barry had other people drawing it or laying it out for him. The dog never looked like a wolf. He always looked like a Rin Tin Tin, but he was supposed to be a wolf. And then sometimes he looked just like a brown dog, so there's a lot of inconsistencies. And so I completely rely upon Tony when it comes to anything like that.
Awesome.
So that kind of leads us in. Sean, you've had a couple of questions here in regards to interaction and a few other things. Do you want to say your questions there, mate?
Yeah, probably a two-part question for the three guests. The first one would be, it was touched on before, so how much interaction is there between Tony, yourself, and the two artists, Mike and Jeff? Obviously, do you just do you provide them with complete strips? Is it a bit by bit? Is there backwards and forwards between you as part of the preparation, or are you just seeing them at the end, as Mike was saying, once he's finished doing them?
Yeah, no, Mike and Jeff see the script in a completed form. Now, not a 3 or 4 or 5 years ago that there would have been a script from beginning to end. They would get a 75-page document. Nowadays, they're really just a few weeks ahead. I mean, I know where the story is going. And they know, just because we'll talk about it either by email or on the phone.
And Tony, they asked you to do that, right? They didn't want you doing beginning to end strips. Am I correct about that?
No, actually, it's the opposite. They actually want me to get back to completed scripts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I kind of hope to do that. There's just so many other things going on. I lost all that time when we had the contract beef in, I think it was 2017. But yeah, no, at one point I was almost ahead by 2 years on both.
Wow.
Now it's more like 6 or 7 weeks now. So, but anyway, the weeks that I do send to Mike and Jeff, those are finished, and it's ready for them to do their work. And then when they file their art, I see that, and it's just completely fine. There's might be a minor adjustment needed here or there.
Okay, so now you guys can see this is what Tony sends me, right? I open it up in a PDF. I think you were writing in some screenwriters program, right?
Yeah, that's in Final Draft.
Right. So this is what I get. I get a script, and this one is, I go up to week 22. So I'm going to start week 17. So you can see here's a whole week. That's the description, what's happening. So I know and Tony's great with like sending links and saying, oh, you need to draw, because one of the things about the Phantom, and particularly these last couple of weeks, and I'm sure Jeff goes through the same thing, is you have to draw military stuff, right? So like in the old days, you would just draw whatever, right? But one of the things I feel anyway, about a strip like this is that it's contemporary, but he has a cell phone, so I don't feel like I can just make up stuff or make stuff inaccurate. So I spend a lot of times, I will stop sharing that. I'll go back. So last week I had to draw all this stuff of,
oh, wow.
They're escaping, right? So I tried to find, there was a specific rocket launcher that you guys might remember, that movie Dogs of War, that gun that Christopher Walken had, that sort of grenade launcher thing. So I had to find that. Tony said which one he wanted of that. I'm drawing a very specific type of military Jeep. And so I would do something, since like he's in Africa, I would do a Google search for South African military vehicle. And then it might say, okay, then you would find, okay, this kind of vehicle. And then I would try to find as many pictures from different angles of that vehicle as possible. Sometimes it's stuff I can just put right in the strip and just draw right over it, like I learned from guys like Al Williamson. That's what the strip guys would do, is they would try to find as much slight as they could. And so if he had to draw cars, he would go get a picture of a car and put it in his projector back in the old days, project it down, and then, draw it. Now I can just find the picture, import it into Clip Studio Paint, which is what I use to ink. And instead of having to use my projector and do it that way, or you go take a picture of something, I've done a lot of that. Jeff, I'm sure can tell you about that in his process. So there is a lot, even though it's a fantasy strip, there is this element now where they're using, so these are like real current military vehicles, real current, I like to draw the Heckler and Koch M5 submachine gun, things like that. I actually went and bought, where is it now? I actually went and bought myself a 45. Yeah, I went and bought so I can, shoot the bad guy. I can, I can take out the
magazine.
The magazine. Yeah, I forget, this was about $150 on eBay. So, even though it's fantasy, and maybe it's because I admire, my heroes are those old strip guys, and that's what they would do. Al had a huge collection of, fake guns and weapons, which are actually hard to find now. It used to be you could go and find an Uzi or a submachine gun or whatever at the store, but you really can't find fake guns anymore because too many kids have been shot by cops because they're running around playing. So they made all the guns like orange. But if you went into a Toys R Us in the 80s, you could find, a 45, we had guns as kids. We all of us guys of this age had guns to play with as kids, but now everything looks like a laser gun. Everything looks like a Nerf gun or whatever. So you have to go to eBay to find like good replicas. But Al had a great collection of guns. So did like most of the strip. I'm sure Dan Barry probably had a great collection of props and things like that.
And you got that rocket launcher under your desk there somewhere too, Mike, right?
Exactly. That's right. That's right. The mailman's with mailman's late, you show him that I want my mail first.
Sean, was that did you have any follow-up on that question?
Yeah, second one. First thing is toy shops are significantly different in Australia than they are in the US, it appears. But the other question was, for each of you, just looking at what you do with your craft, how long does it actually take physically to do an average daily strip, just one day? Or Jeff, a Sunday? And Tony, how long would it take you to put together a story?
Oh, let the art guy.
Go ahead.
No, you.
For me, a Sunday takes 2 days of work, and sometimes I will distribute that across 3 days, but it's still the same number of hours. It's basically like 16 hours to do a Sunday strip, from the time that I do start a thumbnail till when it's ready to be filed. And it's usually, I spend a morning laying the thing out in rough pencils, and then I will send it to Tony for him to, and then I'll add the word balloons after the pencils, so that all the detail is there of the story. I send it to Tony and sort of usually wait for him to say, yeah, this looks fine, or no, you screwed this up. And then I will go on to inks. And as you guys probably know, sometimes I do it digitally on my iPad, and other times I will print out the rough sketch in blue line on 2 pieces of Bristol board and actually do traditional inks. And it just depends on whether I think there's any market for that particular Sunday in terms of selling it to collectors or not.
So how do you decide what's sellable, Jeff?
Well, if the Phantom or other important characters in the strip are prominent in it, I will usually do it on paper. But if it's just like a week where it's where the Phantom doesn't appear, which happens sometimes, Or the other thing is if it's a week when it's hard for me to just chain myself to the drawing board for one reason or another. And so I will do the strip digitally because I know I'll be at like a doctor's office where I can work in the waiting room if I have it on my iPad. So it's those sorts of considerations. And then the inking takes 8 to 10 hours, usually closer to 8. And coloring is usually 2 to 3 hours.
Wow.
So all together, it adds up to 2 8-hour days. However, I want to distribute that across the course of the week.
So do you do anything else? Like, do you do other drawings for other projects, or is it?
I do work for Fru occasionally. In fact, the rest of my week these days is filled out with a special project that I'm working on for Fru that you guys are going to really like, but I don't think I probably can't tell you about it just yet.
No other recording buttons on.
Yeah.
We won't tell anyone, Jeff. We won't tell anyone.
Well, you'll have to ask Glenn about that because it's he might want to spill the beans about that. And plus I do commercial work. I do storyboards for people occasionally, and just other things like that. But frankly, I'm the only for sure thing that I have every week is the Phantom Sunday. And I practically am sort of half retired these days anyway. A lot of my time is spent on personal stuff because my wife has some health problems, and I spend a lot of time taking care of her and taking her to doctor's appointments and things like that. So my schedule's pretty light, which is nice because then I don't have to feel rushed on the Phantom. I can spend as much time as I want to or distribute it across however many days I want for any given week's strip.
And how far ahead are you generally, Jeff?
I set a goal early on to stay 6 months ahead of whatever the publication date was. And so I'm right at that. And I don't know that I'll attempt to go beyond it, really, because that seems like plenty of extra time. If I get hit by a bus, they still have a few months there to find somebody to take over for me. So that gives everybody cushion.
Well,
so
Jeff,
right now I'm working on the end of February.
Jeff, it's good that you are that far ahead. I don't know that we've ever mentioned this, but Mike and I have always said that you are the canary in the coal mine. That we keep waiting for the axe to fall, and we know, hey, the axe hasn't fallen on Jeff, and he's 6 months ahead of us.
Well, that's reassuring, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that's gold. That's funny.
Yeah. It takes me about, the other thing is you never want the editor to know how fast you can work, right? Because if you fall behind, they're going like, oh, wait a minute. I had that podcast where you said you could do a strip in 15 minutes. Come on, Manley. Why are you late this week? Why are you, I generally, I have to split my week. So today I will start the Phantom and I will turn it in sometime on Monday. Generally to pencil something like this, if it's got a lot of military vehicles and guns and soldiers, it always takes longer. If it's figures and jungles and things, or it's more talking heads, the standard from working at Marvel or DC on a monthly book was you had to at least do a page and a half a day. Guys like John Buscema or Gil Kane could do 5, right? Wow. I could do 5 if I had to, right? But then you're doing much looser. You're doing what they would call shakedowns or breakdowns. But to do something finished, I can do 3 strips in a day. I could easily pencil 3 strips a day, depending upon, again, what's on the strip, right? If it's crowd scenes, like Jeff will tell you, the thing that every artist hates is drawing as crowd scenes. Like if they're like, oh, we're going to go to the presidential palace and there's going to be a big, shindig and you've got all these little people, that just slows you down, right? But I draw it traditionally in pencil because I like having the originals like Jeff to sell. And there's certain stuff that every fan wants, the one with the hot chick on it or the Phantom punching somebody, I stopped doing Judge Parker on paper, but then I went back and what I do is I will do a week now on like small, like I get a piece of 11 by 17 and I'll draw a whole week's worth of strips, real light pencils, scan that, and I just have to do it tight enough that I can go over it in ink. So I can draw, if I have to, I can draw a week in a day. I can lay out a week in a day. It may take me a little bit longer to ink it. Again, everything varies because there's no strip is the same. If it's just all heads, that goes pretty fast. But again, if you've got like this whole prison story with, all these guys with the belts and the guns and, you got to get the position of the gun. And I don't have the time because I'm doing both strips. Like Al or a lot of the guys, Williamson or Barry, they would pose. They would get somebody to pose for difficult stuff, right? All the classic strip guys who did all the class always had models whenever possible to pose for stuff. That's why it's very realistic, and it takes time to do stuff like that. But I don't have time to do that. To do that, I just have to roll. So some weeks are harder than others. When I got to know Williamson, the veil was sort of lifted, even though I was a student of comics and comic strips. Behind him in his studio, he had a room built that had what was called a Lucy, or an old opaque projector, which would project. And in there, he literally had stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of old Polaroids, instant Polaroids or stuff that he would shoot pictures. So he would lay out stuff. Then he had pictures from the 50s with him and Frazetta and Wood and the Flegel gang, as they called them, all posing with their guns or sitting there with, Roy Crankle with the light to get the lighting on the figures, because that was a big thing for him, was getting that. They never did, like, you would see the old pictures of the cartoonists where they would have like Milton Caniff sitting at a desk and there's like some pretty dame on the top of the desk, Nobody ever did that. It's like the picture of Walt Disney drawing Mickey Mouse. That shit never happened, right? Walt Disney could not draw Mickey Mouse very well. After Steamboat Willie, that was it. Ub Iwerks was drawing everything, right? So you learn that there's just a lot of time put into any kind of craft where you're having to draw realistic things, right? Like if you look at the early Phantom strips, it was not realistic. And a lot of times there would be no background. There'd just be like the Phantom and a figure and some kind of scribble jungle, that fake old scribble jungle. Like when I draw jungles, I actually go and look at pictures of real jungles to make this fantasy jungle more believable. And I feel that whenever you have to draw something fantastical, you have to base it on real stuff to make it have the credibility, because that's what you want, right? If I was drawing the Phantom like McCoy with the scrubby jungles, people wouldn't like it. They would feel like, oh, that looks very, 1941, 1930s. And for my dad, who's the Phantom was his favorite comic as a kid, that was fine. When you're 8 years old, you're not a critic, And if you go back and you compare the style of the strips historically, and we went from the 20s to the 30s to the 40s to the 50s, every decade the strips became more realistic. Every decade, the Phantom became more realistic. Every decade, Batman became more realistic. And now I think fans just have this expectation of the strips just looking realistic. If I look at the other fandom artists who do stuff around the world, no one's drawing really like Wilson McCoy. You know what I mean? Nobody's doing that sort of like old style Chester Gould kind of cartooning. So it just requires a lot of extra time. Like I know Jeff puts a lot of time into, if you're going to draw the African culture today, right? It can't be, Bwana, you can't draw like the old Tarzan kind of natives because it's just too racist.
No, you cannot.
You can't
You
do
will
like
get in a lot of trouble if you do that.
Right, yeah. But for most of the strips, it was kind of like half there. And I even feel like Guran is like right on the line. He's right on the line because nobody in Africa wears plants on the top of their head anymore. It looks great. It's a cool thing. But one step, and then it becomes like Ebony in the Spirit, which at the time didn't appear to be racist to the people who did it. But now you look at it and you go like, whoa, that is not right. And I know from around the world, the Phantom is very popular in all these other cultures. And so I feel like I can't draw any native person as a stereotype. They're not a prop. Like in the old days, you had Tarzan and everybody else was a prop. The gorillas are prop, the black guys are props, the girls are props. Everything was a prop just for Tarzan. But I feel like on a strip like this, you can't do that now. So, like I said, every decade it becomes more realistic.
Yeah, if I can add to that for a second, I always feel like I'm walking on eggshells whenever I have to draw the Bandar because they're supposed to be pygmies, but you don't want them to look like children. You don't want them to look like some sort of inferior tribe.
Right.
And I'm just not sure I'm getting that balancing act right, but I know exactly what. It's a sensitive thing that you have to be very careful with.
Yeah. Jermayn, one thing that's worth mentioning here is that the story that Jeff is working on right now originated specifically with his interest in drawing authentic African culture. So when you start to see that appearing in the strip, I think you'll appreciate it. It's a story basically about two girls from the Maury Coast, and the Phantom the Phantom's there kind of protecting them from dangers they're not completely aware of because it comes from a different culture. So, I like to know what the artists are interested in because I always want to write scripts that really engage them. So, I could see that was a real interest that Jeff had, and we started talking about it. And so, it generated a whole 30-week story, I think. So,
yeah, because if you look at real pygmies, because again, that's one of the things that I felt I was tasked with. There's a couple things I feel you're tasked with when you handle a classic character. One, you have to respect the material and the audience because the audience is expecting the material to continue on in a certain way. I think my natural style and influences are close to the Barry style. So I sort of feel like I'm playing Cy Barry to a certain extent, even though I'm not like necessarily trying to imitate him. But it would be like if I drew Spider-Man, my Spider-Man is John Romita, or Gil Kane. That's what lives in my head. That's the character that lives in my head. So when I was looking at the African cultures, I actually had to do a lot of Google stuff. And if you look at a real pygmy, well, the pygmies in the real world didn't look like the pygmies in the strip. They just they took like black people and just like made them smaller, right? Like you just had a shrinking ray. And that's not the way pygmies look. Their whole body is constructed differently. So I feel like if you're going to be authentic, you have to pay attention to things like that, or you're just doing the old sort of racist stereotype of other cultures. And, not that the people were particularly trying to be racist back in the day, because also, I mean, where would you go to find pictures of pygmies? You'd have to go to National Geographic if you were lucky they did an issue on pygmies, or you'd have to go to the library or the New York Public Library if you lived in New York and get a research assistant to find pictures of those cultures. Well, these guys were doing this shit like lickety split. They didn't have time to go to, that's why guys like Kniff had assistants, right? All those old strip guys had assistants, right? They had guys that would do the backgrounds or would do research, right? Well, I don't, I have an assistant, but I can't say, Liang, go down to the Philadelphia Public Research Library, and I'd like you to find some reference on, African villages circa 1957, right? We don't have that time. So I'm sure, like Jeff, you probably spend a lot of time Googling, right? Like going, and it's like a rabbit hole. Once you find one thing and you go down, you keep going down, So I sort of feel like with this strip, there are inherent difficulties that you have to be aware of. The same way with Judge Parker. I mean, that strip's been going since the 50s, right? So when I started the strip in 2010, Sam was driving a 2010 Corvette. He's still driving a 2010 Corvette because we've never had him go buy a 2018 Corvette. Everybody still has a new iPhone, but we never show them going to the Apple store and going like, oh, why can't I transfer my files over? We don't, all that stuff happens somehow magically as we go along, right? Like we never showed the Phantom going to the Apple store and going like, I need to get my new Garan, can you update my my software? We never show that. So there's a lot of I don't know if the other guys ever think about stuff like that, but I'm always thinking about that. Like, would the Phantom be a guy who goes, no, I don't believe in cell phones. I don't believe in this modern world. I will never have a Twitter.
Yeah, no, he kind of quietly evolves with the times, that's sort of the folk tradition, like one day Colonel Weeks disappears and Colonel Warubu is running the show, and there's never any explanation for what happened.
Yeah. Until you create a story about that, Tony.
Yes. I think that was Paul Ryan's idea. Oh. Yeah, I seem to think Paul Ryan suggested that. Whatever happened to Colonel Weeks? I said, I don't know. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, no, I just reread that story recently. So yeah. All right, we'll go on to the next question.
I think I got Ankit as next.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
My question was part of it was kind of answered by you guys while you were talking about it. Like, I'm also a big fan of Al Williamson, so it's good to hear. I had no idea you worked with Al. So yeah, I basically wanted to ask this question: that have you ever got any now I got to know you color your own strip, but on the daily strips, I see the dots on the Phantom. That is one thing which is not there on the Sundays. So is that like a design choice, or is it necessary because some newspapers might still print it in grayscale?
Well, I put the dot screen. It was traditionally called Benday, which was was basically a piece of acetate in the old days, like when Al would do it. It was a piece of acetate that had the dots on it, and you would put down rubber cement and you would stick it down and you would cut it away. Then it became what was known as Zipatone, which was a company that made it that you could cut the sheets and stick it down. Now that's still made in Japan because of all the manga artists use it. They stopped making it in America. I do it on the strip now. I do it digitally because I actually have scanned in some old pieces of Zipatone. I do it because that's the way the strip looked. No one said do that. Again, that's one of the weird, like Jeff was saying, no one said this is what you should do. They just said, I mean, because literally Paul Ryan passed away and within 2 weeks I was working on the strip. So Tony was a big help, but nobody said use a 20% zip, right? I had to sort of like figure all that out. Now it's colored for Comics Kingdom, and I'm always having issues with the coloring. But most of the papers around the world are not running it.
Can I interrupt? Just, you don't color the daily strips. They do it at the King office. Okay.
Now, what I used to do, or if I'm far enough ahead, what I would do is I would actually go back and recolor the strips, because the colorist is used to coloring things like Heathcliff and, you know, more cartoony stuff. And you can't color a realistic strip like you can, you know, High and Lois or Hagar the Horrible. And so I've always had issues with the coloring on the strip. And very often there would be weeks that I would go back and completely recolor myself. So I'm still always on the fence with King about that. I'm not quite happy with the color. It's better than it used to be. But the zip is put on, like Terry Beatty did the same thing on the two strips when he did the Phantom. He would put the zip on for the black and white newspapers, right? Which is, you know, there's not that many papers in America that run it, but that was a choice I did because that's the way it looked. Again, it's not like anyone at King gives you any technical, they give you technical specs like has to be 600 DPI at the size. That's what we want. But as far as all that other stuff, there's no, like at Marvel, there was a John Romita, and at DC, there was Mark Chiarello. They were the art director. So there was all this, or Danny Crespi and John Porton and all these guys back in the old days. There's no bullpen at King, is what I'm saying. So how you turn the stuff in is just because we're knowledgeable about the way comics are produced. So it's not like they said, use this type of particular font. I didn't even know what font, right? I'm using the font that I used on Judge Parker. I don't know what Paul used. And I'm using the font that Ed Barretto used when he was doing Judge Parker. So I've just been using the same font on everything. So, because they don't even know. They don't even have the font. So if I have to correct anything, I'm sure it's the same with Jeff. If you have to correct anything, you have to do it, because at Marvel, if you send something in, or DC, if you send something in the old day and it was messed up, or they wanted to change, they had a bullpen, and those people would do it. And back in the day at King Features, Barry would probably send his strips in. If you guys see old strips where there's a blue pencil on the art, that was to tell the production people, put the Zipatone on the Phantom here. This is where I want the Zipatone to be put, the tone pattern to be put on. But now we are completely responsible for all the production. So there's no production team at King Features like there used to be back in when they had the offices in New York. So you're completely on your own as far as turning it in. They gave you color specs, right, Jeff? They gave you the color specs of like how to color the Phantom, or did you not get that?
I don't think, if they did, I never paid any attention to it, to be honest.
You know, I just wanted to say, like, knowing this, I wanted to ask this question because if you, like, you know, like the colors on the Sunday strip is looks way superior to the daily. Okay, that might be because it's been traditionally that way. But now with technology, and especially now that I know that it's pretty much in your control, and it's not like how it works in DC Marvel where you have different, levels for everything. Don't you think there should be like a thing from editorial where they want a certain amount of consistency between the Sunday and the daily when it comes to production in the colors? Because say when we are reprinting those strips in comics, which is what is happening in India or even in Australia, when the dailies are printed, usually what happens is the publisher doesn't want to print the Sundays with the dailies in the same book. They always tend to put the dailies with dailies, because over there the drastic change, especially it happened with us in one of our books. So we saw that like the Paul Ryan Sundays, I think it was Tom Smith doing the colors, and the Paul Ryan dailies, they had such a shift that the audiences might complain. So even so I was seeing your pencils, and they are really much more detailed. And when I see them coming out in my local newspaper, which is in Bengali, by the way, so I read it in translation, it looks completely different. So it looks actually like detail has been kind of lost instead of it being gained when it should go through all the stages, like, the half shadows and everything, which the Sunday strip completely has. And the daily is like completely flat in that way. Huh. So anyway, you want to address that in the future?
I can say I wish occasionally that I did get a little more direction from King on things like technical things, specifically the color. I found myself sort of struggling with the color a lot over the time I've been working on the strip, not knowing how saturated to make them, not sure what to expect in terms of like dot gain when the newspaper prints the thing. And you try and make a compromise between how washed out you think you have to make things to make it print well in the newspaper, but still look good on screen because tons of people read it online instead. If I totally try and accommodate the newspaper, then I end up with a pretty anemic looking online strip, it seems to me. And if I really do the color for the screen, then I'm pretty confident that it's going to turn out like mud on a printed newspaper. And no one's ever given me any specific advice on how to sort of thread that needle. So I just take my best guess. A few months back, I got a letter from somebody. I think it was a piece of email. And he said, "What the hell's with all these night scenes in the Phantom? It just looks horrible, and I can't find, it just comes out terrible." And I said, "Well, I never get to see it in print. If you would be doing me a great favor if you would send me some strips like what you're complaining about." And the guy did. And, he was right. I was just oversaturating the color way too much in those night scenes, especially like deep cyan, deep blue is something that I try and stay away from now. So I'm sort of indebted to him for sort of filling me in on what was working and what wasn't, at least in his newspaper. The other problem is you don't know that each newspaper is printing with the same ink densities. Yeah. And so, it's just a complete free-for-all out there. And you just have to take your best guess as to how it's going to print. And I'm not sure I'm still getting it right, but hopefully I'll learn more as I go. And hopefully I'm doing the best I can. And it's not ending up a block of mud on the comics page.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You're 6 months ahead, which we appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad used to clip Judge Parker because they used to run that in the Detroit Free Press. So he would clip them and send them to me, and then I could actually see what it looked like. Because Jeff's right. I would, no paper in my area carries the strips. So I have no idea what anything looks like. Okay, I know there's only a couple times I've seen the Phantom in print. And that's because my friend Jamar, my buddy who does the podcast with me, his in-laws live in Connecticut, and he'll go up to Connecticut, and there's one paper in Connecticut that carries like all the soaps and everything. So you will see, oh, Judge Parker and the Phantom, and like, oh, that's what I get to see, like how small the image is in the paper, right? And he's right. Jeff is right. I have no control. I don't have final control over what anything looks like. I try my best to make it look good. I make color notes. Like I said, when I was further ahead, they would send stuff for me to look over and correct. There's many things that I would correct. I would really wish I could color the strip myself, but it's just not possible. And I think part of it is that King has a team of colorists that color all their strips, right? Like people on staff. And like I said, I think, coloring the Lockhorns or, Zippy the Pinhead or whatever is not like coloring a realistic strip. And especially for you guys, because you're not, I grew up with the old fashioned coloring, the 64 colors plus the 10 with the extra, the K-tones, which had the black in it, right? So all that stuff was colored production, all printed in the same place, right? But Jeff is right. One of the things we have to be aware of, although we have no control over, is that the newspapers are printed all over the United States. So what they're doing at the, yeah, right. And we don't know, they might be doing a crappy job on one in Mississippi and a great job on one in Oregon, but we don't know what the variation is, right? Yeah. The comic books are all done in one place. There was one place that printed all the comics, all the Marvel, all the DC. It used to be the Sparta, and then it changed to some, and then it was like Quebecor. They were all done in one place. So all those
just for the record, Mike, if I can interrupt, I live close to Sparta. I went down there on a pilgrimage not too long ago. It's about 60 miles from my home, just to see the old plant. It was an amazing sort of a thing to see. But go ahead.
No. I mean that's great. So one of the things, like whenever I teach a class, I try to also explain to people the process of how the stuff was done and how handcrafted it was done, right? So when Jeff does his colors, the computer makes the separations. It's all automated. In the old days, when he would do his colors, he would color it with usually markers or Dr. Martin's dyes. He would write a code, like the Phantom might be 30% blue and 10% red to get that purple. And there would be a little code. And then when they would get the art, somebody in the plant would actually make one, because it's CMYK, the 4 colors. Somebody would hand make those colors on a ruby lith or with a pen opaque. It was all done by these ladies, a team of supposedly old ladies, people that did it. It was all hand done. So, and then they would send proofs back to Marvel or DC. And you guys probably all seen those rare comics that they printed where like suddenly the Fantastic Four is like orange or something. They messed up because somebody reversed one of the plates or something.
Right. They printed a red, blue, or blue plate red. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But that's all gone now. And that's all done by the computer. So we have no idea until we actually see, or somebody sends us something, right? I don't know what's going to look like until I see the strip today. When I go look at the strip this morning, I'll see what the colors look like. By then, it's too late. A few times when they've made a really big boo-boo, I've asked them to, like, that happened actually. Tony, remember that, where they colored the Phantom's wife like
yes,
Savannah, right?
Right. Yes, and right, we called that to their attention. I don't know that that's ever been fixed. I remember calling other errors to their attention that I know for a fact were never fixed. A guy gets punched in the nose and you drew like a a drop of blood coming under, and it looks like snot because they color it white, So
They did fix those two things, but there's other things that, again, I know these people are cranking out probably, 75 strips a day.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like on automatic, and you don't necessarily know what. I will try to put notes in, say, make sure that you color this color. Make sure this is so-and-so's wife. Make sure you do this. Sometimes I actually include colors. I had a long, that's my biggest continuous complaint about the strip is I'm not happy with the coloring. I used to go around and around and around with the old editor, sending her samples of old style coloring that I feel was really good. So you couldn't say like, well, you can't use those colors or things like that. But I think it's just the nature of the beast, because you have to produce 365 Phantom strips, yes or yes, every year. And there's just a lot of gimmies that you just have to sort of take, I mean, I'm not always happy with, every week when I look at my proofs, I go, I wish I could go redraw that. I wish I could.
Yeah.
Maybe I could change this angle. Oh, why did I do that? And it's the nature of having to produce so much work. Good day, bad day. I had a couple of health problems the last couple of years I had to have surgery on my leg. I'm in the hospital bed, getting ready to be operated on, drawing on my tablet. And the doctor's coming in and looking at me and like, what are you doing? And I was literally working right up until they wheeled me into surgery.
That is a fact. And the thing about Lee Falk, like ripping off his oxygen mask on his deathbed, trying to write another day of Phantom. I've always thought that's apocryphal, but Mike does work from the hospital. That's a fact.
That's awesome. Also, just want to quickly shout out to Bradley and Swaroop, who have joined us mid-podcast as well. So, g'day, guys. Duncan, you had a couple of questions. I think he's fallen asleep.
Yeah. No. For Jeff and Mike, you're both known for your other work outside the Phantom, and at conventions in the US when they were face to face, and I know some of them are starting to come back. How does the Phantom fan base compare in the US to the fans of your other work? Are they the quiet minority? Do you just find people coming specifically to see you at those events? Like, I know Jeff probably experienced in Australia, a lot of the people that came to see you when you came to Sydney, Jeff, and Perth, they wouldn't have gone to Supernova except to see you. Do you find that with your other fans as well? How does the Phantom compare in terms of your other fans?
Well, in my case, there's a really strong separation between Phantom fans and the other fans. For one thing, my other work is all these sort of graphic novels that aren't circulated nearly as worldwide as the Phantom is, and they're graphic novels for kids too. So the biggest difference between the two fan bases is everybody that followed my graphic novels was like under 12, and everybody that follows the Phantom seems to be like 50 or over or something like that. With
there's a couple of us younger folk here.
Yeah. There's some.
I'm still in my 30s, but still there.
Yeah, get over it, because you're hanging out with the old guy.
That's right. We're rounding you up to 50. That's
I'll be a little less specific and say Phantom is adult fans and almost no kids, and my other work is kids, and the kids are really focused on the work itself. You know, they don't think of me as a person. They don't think about the fact that there's somebody doing this. They just like the book. And the Phantom fans are more interested in sort of the nuts and bolts of, you know, who the artists are and noticing their style and things like that. I have to admit that I find attention from the kids a lot more gratifying in a lot of ways, because they're coming in cold. You know, they're not the people who I encounter from the Phantom are Phantom fans. Yeah. And the kids that like my graphic novels are fans of my graphic novels. And the work that I bring to it, you know, that stuff that just wouldn't exist without my input. Whereas I'm just carrying on a long tradition with the Phantom. So they're not, the Phantom fans aren't Jeff Weigel fans, they're Phantom fans. And the kid fans are more specifically geared to liking something that I created from whole cloth. So that's a little more gratifying. And I also like the idea that I'm sort of forming their sensibilities and tastes with my work too. Like, one of the most gratifying experiences I've ever had professionally is this mom sent me a picture of her daughter. They had put together a Halloween costume for her of my Dragon Girl character. And you just can't beat that feeling. That just, you know, I framed that and put it downstairs by my computer, and I look at it every day to remind myself of the impact that you can have with your work.
Wow.
That's great.
I will disagree with your underselling the contribution that you're making to the strip by saying that you're just carrying a load. You are very much elevating with everything you do. And thank you.
I'm certainly trying to do that. There's a real responsibility in working on a strip like the Phantom, and you don't want people to think, you don't want to think that you're just sort of picking up the slack. You're just picking up the rope and dragging something along. You want to add to it. And my goal every week, as soon as I pick up the pencil, is to be as good or better than everything that's gone before. I don't always meet that goal, but that's what I'm trying for.
Jeff, I know you mentioned that when you spoke at the Phantom dinner, and I think we all appreciated hearing that, you know, how heartfelt that was from you, the way that you brought that into your thinking behind it as well.
Yeah, I could not be more thrilled with working on the Phantom every week. I can't think of a better, more fulfilling thing for me to do.
And Mike, the same question for the Phantom fans compared to the fans of your other work. Have you noticed a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a little crossover, but it really has to do with age, because most of the people that are fans of my work overall have gray hair on their chin now, right? Guys that were buying my stuff in 1990 or in the 80s are in their 40s now, right? And that's something I really began to notice over the past, I don't know, 6-7 years. And it used to be more crossover of people reading strips and comics, but I think, I mean, I'm 59, I'm going to turn 60 in October. I'm the end of that. I'm the end of that, really, because I'm old enough to have read strips in the 60s when I could first look at stuff. And my dad would tell me about characters like the Phantom or the Spirit, which I didn't see in the newspaper, but they always sounded, or Popeye, you know, it'd be because he was a big fan of comics. But yeah, the people who like Batman, and part of it is also you can't find the strip. I would say that that's probably the main thing. You can find it now online, but for a lot of people, they can't find the strips because the papers have cut the strips out. Every newspaper wants to get rid of the strips. They would get rid of them tomorrow and put nothing but tire ads, right? But the people who buy newspapers go, I want my strip. And whenever they've tried to cancel Judge Parker every year since I started it, and that's like, I'm going to be in my 12th year soon, right? Every year they try to cancel it, and people write in and go, put the strip back in the paper. So I do have some crossover. The Phantom fans tend to be people who are older, because young kids don't read newspapers, you know. And this is something I've talked a lot to my other artist friends about, because you are responsible for your career always. And if Jack Kirby was alive today, he would be doing a webcomic. He would be doing something on Webtoons, right? He would be reaching the 12-year-old today and that's how, and I know this from being a teacher, that's how people absorb stuff through the phone. So I know, like, if I meet people who like the Phantom, they're usually older. They're not going to be younger, which is actually good in a way, because you know they really appreciate it and they're much more knowledgeable. I mean, getting to know you guys and becoming, like Jeff says, I feel very proud to do this strip. I feel I have a responsibility in doing this, even more so than when I would work on something at Marvel or DC, because, you know, you don't have that many guys have done the Phantom, right? And there's a lot of people that are doing Batman at the same time. At DC, there's probably 15 Batman titles this month, drawn by 15 different people. 15 different interpretations, even within the same continuity. In this case, you have two guys in the same continuity, and it used to be just one guy. So I feel it's a different audience. It's a more mature audience. It's an audience that's very passionate. And that, I appreciate that. I like that. I feel like I really like doing this character, and I feel, for the type of craft that I like to do, the way I like to work, this is like a perfect match of story and character. So I really love doing this strip, probably, you know, more than anything, because I initially was excited to do Batman, but I was not excited to do the whole thing where you're like one part of like a 95-part story. And I sort of feel like on that, I'm not really able to contribute in the way that I'm able to contribute on the Phantom, you know? So it's definitely a different audience. It's a more mature audience, which I really like that.
That's great.
Chris, you've got a...
Yes, I think one of them was sort of answered before, but I was just wondering about the timeline from when you submit to King Features till it actually gets published. I think you mentioned, Mike, just a couple of weeks or something, but Jeff, you said you're now 6 months in advance, so they're sitting on your artwork and everything ready to go, so that there's no problem with them getting that in. But, you know, is it a tight time frame having to submit and then it comes out a couple of weeks later?
For me, yes. I would like to be another 4 weeks ahead. And so that's what I'm trying to do now is to gain like a day here, a day there. But again, you know, it's like you have to put so much into the strip. It's just like, I can't, you know, if I was doing it all myself, I could say, okay, I'm going to catch up and I'm going to just draw a whole week of like talking heads, right? You would see that on a strip every once in a while, but I can't really do that on the strip. And I always feel, I don't know if the other guys feel the same way. I always feel like you're always auditioning. You're always, you know, there's a lot of pressure, like I said, for the newspapers to drop a strip. And if you drop the ball, people could go, well, you know, I used to really like the Phantom, but Manley's really just dropping the ball on this. You know, they're not going to fight to keep it in the paper. So I would like to be further ahead, but every single guy I know that worked in strips always complains about that. I know Al used to complain about that. The only guy I know that used to be really far ahead was Frank Robbins. He used to have like, basically, he would send in, the average story used to be 13 or 14 weeks, was the typical length of an average comic strip story. And he would be so far ahead, he'd have sending one in and he'd have like 2 sitting. He'd have like a half a year of strips. But again, he was one guy doing the whole thing, right? So, and he was very prolific.
Yeah, he's very fast, I understand.
Yeah. So, and he actually lettered the strip himself and everything. I mean, there's a lot of things like that. Like in the old days, Barry wasn't lettering the strip. You know, most of those guys had 2 or 3 guys that lettered most of the comic strips. And they all lived in Connecticut. There's a great book. If you guys want to read a really good book, it's called Cartoon County or Cartoon Country. It was written by John Cullen Murphy's son, and it describes the community in Connecticut, mostly in Connecticut and New York, of all the strip guys and cartoonists that also used to live around Westport, Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the guys like Starr, Drake, Raymond, I mean, all those guys had people that lettered the strips. Some guys lettered their own strips, but usually the continuity guys didn't letter their strips. There would be 2 or 3 guys that would go around. They would literally drive around and pick up everybody's strips, go home and letter them, and then bring them all back. And then everybody would ink it, get on the train, and send it into New York. Or if you lived in California, post it into the offices. So there's a lot of things like that. Like we're responsible for our lettering, right? That's just something that you have to eat now. You know, just a lot of technology is on the artist also to stay up with the technology so that you can actually deliver the material, because King Features doesn't want you to send in, hey, here's 90 strips. Go ahead and scan them and, you know, put the zipatone on them and do all the productions. You have to do all that now.
I actually like that part of it. I like having that much control. I like, you know, being able to decide exactly where the word balloons are going to fall and designing the compositions correctly so that I'm not squeezing things. And, you know, my least favorite part of it is probably the color, but I still like having control over the color.
So is there an official Phantom purple color?
Well, there is for me. There's always like a base that I always start with, and depending on whether it's a night scene, I might darken it a little bit. But and it's a figure that I got from Terry Beatty when I took over. Excuse me. And that's 40% magenta, 40% cyan.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Yeah,
that's what I use. But I don't. That wasn't dictated by King Features. I just got it from Terry, and I've been following it ever since. And I assume what it does is it makes it purple without being this sort of screaming Mardi Gras purple. And it's also, I don't worry about it becoming oversaturated in the newspapers. So that's my base. That's where I start from, is 40-40 on the cyan and magenta.
Len Ford told me once that there was a Pantone purple that is the same as the Lego purple is the right number from King Features, but I can't remember the number.
Oh, really? No, I've never gotten that advice.
But Glenn might have been bullshitting me. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we sort of have to figure out ourselves. Like the size that you want to work at can be any size. You can do anything, but it has to be delivered in a very specific, 6.5 by 2 at 600 DPI as a TIFF. That's how I have to turn in my bitmap. That's how I have to turn in the final art, right? So they have, when I first started on Judge Parker, it was also different because they sent me proofs, physical paper proofs every week of the strips. So I would get to see what they would then send. They would send that physical proof. The reason why you guys have old strips is because someone somewhere had those pieces of paper proofs, right? Like Williamson had a whole library of proofs, not only of his stuff, but of like a lot of classic old strips that he had picked up over the years. So they would send that physical proof to all the newspapers. Well, now that's all digital. Like, I don't know, like 10 years ago, they stopped sending the physical proofs, and now everything goes out as a PDF. So again, you don't even have any, I don't get anything physical. It's a completely, this is physical for me, but after it's in the computer, it's all digital.
Mike, there's a printer's, one of the proofs that you're talking about. This one was sent to Lee Fort. And so it was just the mail that you were talking about there. Right.
And so you would get that, but then they stopped doing that. And I never had a proof on the Sunday. They sent me when I first started on Judge Parker, they sent me a technical thing, like you can't have colors over this, can't be oversaturated. They actually wanted the color separated. So you had a black line and then you had like a color layer, but I stopped doing that like right away, and I just flattened it all in Photoshop and sent it in, and they don't have any problem. As long as it's CMYK, they didn't have any problem. So, again, it's sort of like hit the ground running, turn it in like I did. There was 2 weeks of time between when Paul passed away and I picked up the ball and started running. And it's the same way when I took over Judge Parker, because Ed Barreto was sick and they were looking for a fill-in, and then he passed away. So, and there's not a lot of people that can do, a lot of people can do comics, but not a lot of people that can do comics all the time.
Right.
You have to, it's like literally, it's like the endless marathon, right? As soon as I'm done with this, I got to jump right on the Sunday for Judge Parker, then the dailies for Judge Parker. And then I just turned in the Judge Parker dailies at 3 this morning. And as soon as I'm done with this podcast, I'm going to start working on the Phantom dailies that will go in on Monday. So you really have to keep going.
And so just to confirm, so when on Monday, that will be a whole 6 days of Phantom dailies? You do a week at a time? Yeah, wow.
Yep. Yeah.
Chris also had another question here about a favorite story that you've really enjoyed, whether it's the story yourself or working on a particular story. It was actually fun as it developed. Was there any, we might start with you, Tony. One of your favorite stories that you've written?
It's, I think it's always the one that I'm writing now. I always think that, this is the last story, for any number of reasons. I'll get hit in the head with a space rock, or they'll cancel the strip, or who knows. But I always think, have fun with this story. This is the story. But if you're thinking more about previous stories, gosh, I don't know. It's just so hard to, I think I do enjoy the stories that have kids in them. I'm thinking of, you remember the girl who was like the graffiti artist, the graffiti Phantom story?
Yep.
I like stories where the Phantom interacts with kids. That one, the college kid, that type of thing. Or the one where the Phantom was out taking Kit and Heloise on basically jungle training. And but no, my favorite story right now is the one that, the ones that I'm doing right, at the present moment. It's kind of, Jeff is so far ahead. It's kind of interesting. We're already talking about a story beyond the one no one in the readership has seen. I mean, he basically has almost a completed story done that hasn't started publication yet. And we're talking about the one beyond that, which is going to be a lot of fun. It'll be kind of a return to that Temple of the Gods thing that we did way back. Yeah. So, yeah, no, after this, I'm gonna go sit down at my writing desk and work on my favorite story.
Well, the way that you were smiling before, well, it might have lots of crowd scenes just for Mike there, just lots of crowd scenes, lots of soldiers. I saw your face as you were mentioning that before, just this big grin come on your face. Oh, I wonder if he's...
Just for the record, this week, my project is I've got a strip to do that happens in a dance club with like a bunch of people dancing. So it's not only a crowd scene, but they all have to be dancing too. So.
Maybe the Phantom talking to a lot of pygmies at once or something.
Pygmies dancing. We'll do that next.
Favorite story?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really have a soft spot for The Rat Must Die from a few years ago. And it's a personal thing because that was the first beginning to end Phantom story that I had worked on. And also, the first week I started that story, I suddenly felt like I found my sea legs on a strip. And, I just remember doing that first Sunday for The Rat Must Die and going, yeah, I think I got this now. And it went on these scenes, if you guys remember, down in the sewers and in the weird dungeons of the prison. I just really loved to draw on those things. And I just felt like I was pulling out all the stops and having a lot of fun with it. So that story is probably always going to have a special place in my heart as my first complete Phantom story and the one where I really felt at home doing it.
Your work on that was just stupendous. I do remember we talked about at the very beginning. I think I urged you to watch Orson Welles' The Third Man for for inspiration on the sewer scenes.
And I did that very thing. Yes,
that was it was fantastic how you pulled that off.
Yeah,
thanks.
That was great. I think my favorite one was the I guess was it the last? No, the one before the last one, where he got to see the flaming skeleton Phantom, and you will die. That was with all the dream stuff, because he got bit by the fleas or the ticks. I really liked that because it got to do weird action, bizarre dream stuff, and I like drawing skeletons and like drawing flaming skeletons, because if you're going to draw a skeleton, what's better than a skeleton? A flaming skeleton. So I really liked that. I felt that was that it also challenged me in a way, because I wanted to try to make it dynamic. And the hardest thing about the strip, I'm sure Jeff must feel this someday, some way. Some days you want to go like this. You want to, if I could only have a composition that went like this, but it's all, and so I was like, it was really challenging to make it dynamic in the way I can on a comic book page in a very small, defined space. I can't ever change the proportions of that. So there's always a challenge there creatively to make this interesting. And especially, compared to something like Judge Parker, which is much more like a traditional soap opera. You're not really drawing any very much exaggeration or anything. So that really, Tony wrote a great script. That was a great story, and that really challenged me to try to come up with visuals that would capture, the coolness of that story. So I like that. I think I like the supernatural aspect of the character. because there were the, when I would study the old strips, you would see there was a story about a witch, or there was a story about this or that. And I guess, I don't know how you fans feel about that. If you like the more realistic stories, or you like the more fantasy-based stories. I mean, I know Tony and I have often talked about one of the things that we're both very much on the same page with is that the Phantom is not Batman, right? Batman was a very interesting character who is now really boring because he's just basically a cranky old guy who's always growling, and he's no longer a detective. He's no longer this dual identity character, which was always interesting. There was a lot of old Batman stories where Bruce Wayne did stuff, and then he would be Batman, sort of like, like James Bond, kind of, right? And I feel that they basically whittled him down to just being this Jeff Bezos with a chip on his shoulder. He's just this rich guy who, he's not a detective anymore. He's not a sleuth of any kind. He doesn't really have much of a personality, and I completely blame that on the fact that once they did Dark Knight, which was cool, it was just one story, and then they made that sort of like the framework for everything else. So I don't feel that the Phantom is like that. He's not this vengeful, wrathful, always angry, gritted teeth. He's not that type of character.
Right. And I should say, I got that wrong when I first started on the strip too. I wasn't sure who he was for a while. And those early ones, you can see him doing a lot of that grimacing that Batman does. And then it dawned on me that Phantom is a guy who likes his job.
Yeah. I mean, he can be grim or tough, and you do draw the grim face, but he's not. He's more Adam West than Christian Bale. He's a happy hero. He's not a troubled person, right? And so I feel when I'm drawing that character, that's who he is. He's not Bruce Wayne, which I think when they bring him in the comics, they always turn him into Batman. They always make him a grim.
Right. They don't get it.
That stuff is, it's hard to read what they've done with the Phantom in some of the American comics. I know in one case I was asked to blurb one of those books, and I asked to see the script, and 2 pages into the script, I said, no, I don't know who this character is.
Yeah, well, for listeners to the podcast, we've just in episode, what was it, Stephen?
196.
196. We've just started talking about, there is a need for a Phantom Bible because there is plenty of stories that have been produced by some US publishers and stuff where the character's just not recognizable. He's either a purple wearing Tarzan or a Batman or a Punisher.
Yeah, well, everybody's sort of like the Punisher now. That's sort of like the default. If I'm a tough guy, I'm like Frank Castle. I'm like the Punisher.
But yeah, you're absolutely correct. Phantom's not that.
Yeah. The Phantom would not have been in the January 6th mob storming the Capitol, but the Punisher might have been.
Oh, very good. Has anyone got any other?
Easy for you to say.
But according to the current artist and/or a couple of the guys that have drawn the Punisher, they don't want him adopted as part of the far right poster boy. He's very much. I've seen a few guys write about it, and they said, "No. Don't you adopt the Punisher as your bloody poster boy. He's not. He's got nothing to do with trumpets. Yeah. That's just sidelight. One comment. I love what Fru's done with a lot of the new artists, getting him in to do covers and bits and pieces. And I enjoy it all because I enjoy it all. I'm stupid. But I get a little bit annoyed with all the young blokes doing the Phantom, and all the covers, they're angry Phantom, and he's just so aggro, and he's got to be. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's one part of him, but what about the humour of Ray Moore and the humour of Wilson McCoy and those stories is pivotal to my understanding of the Phantom, and I would just love a few more covers where I think Jeff's done a few where he's smiling, or your classic one, Jeff, of the Christmas one with the jumper, which I'm so trying to get knitted, but that's another story. Is the other side of it that it needs to balance it out. Enough said from Trevor.
Yeah, no, I think everyone agrees with you, Trevor.
Yeah, and we'd also just in the last maybe 20 minutes now, we've had another guest join us. G'day, Paul. Is he working away there by the looks of things?
Yeah, I'm sorry to crash. I had guests around the house, and I remembered this was on, and I thought, by chance, you're probably all still here talking. So I thought I'd chime in.
Good chance.
I thought I'd chime in and listen, because I love the work of these three gentlemen in particular, and of course the podcast. So I just thought I'd pop in and have a listen while I was scribbling. So don't mind me, but thank you. I appreciate it.
No worries. Do you have a question while you're here, just to put you on the spot? That's all.
Look, I don't want to ask anything that's probably been talked about in the last couple of hours, so I won't. I'll just be a silent admirer and leave it at that.
Last couple of hours.
Yeah. Well, you guys kicked off at 9, right?
Yeah.
Well, depending on where you are in the world, it's 9 o'clock here. It's about 20 past 11 now. So I didn't want to. I don't want to be that guy that asks a repeat question and annoy people. But as you know, I'm a big fan. I had the pleasure of meeting Jeff while he was out here, and we had a panel together. I bought some of his roughs, and I'm actually my only piece of artwork that I bought off an artist apart from Jeff is Mikael. I bought a daily strip from one of his eBays a few years ago. So I just want to chime in and say hello. And I'm also I have a lot of draw magazines as well, so I'm a big fan of your editorial stuff there too. So,
well, thank you very much.
I think, Paul, I think you're probably underselling yourself. You should probably be properly introduced, Jermayn, as to what work has been.
Not my podcast, my friend. So
no.
I was tossing up whether to do that or not, especially when Trevor just let it in so nicely with the fun or the different types of covers and Paul's latest cover. I don't know if anyone's got it with them. Jermayn's looking for it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, okay.
Nice and relaxed.
Oh,
yeah, and there's where was it? Well,
there is a little nod there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if people can see
I don't
that.
think it'll come up on there, but the street is Weigel Street. And the last issue had a business called DePaul and Manley. So
Paul was the strip, the series artist on Kid Phantom, the run that was done through.
Okay.
Covers and complete interiors, I recall, and the man who got to draw the army of 1,000 warriors, which was something that was discussed before about the love of crowd scenes by other artists.
Yeah, no, that turned out okay. It was
very good.
It was not the drawing, but the relatively it was when the script writer, when Andrew wrote Times Square, and got to sit down for the afternoon and left me with a drawing of Times Square to do in the 1960s. That's probably the one that gives me the Vietnam flashbacks more than anything else. So, yeah.
So I know Duncan had a second question. Before we go to that one, is there anyone else who'd like anything that you don't think has been answered, or anything else you'd like to?
Can I ask one more question? I have been a little bit too much presence, but anyway. Tony, what is your cat's name?
Oh, the cat is Zuzu.
Thank you.
From It's a Wonderful Life. I think that was the little girl's name, right?
Yep.
Zuzu's Petals.
Petals.
Zuzu's Petals.
Yeah.
I think I've seen cats in all three of yours backgrounds during the podcast.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know where my
three of
kid
them.
is.
There was a towel sticking up before, and it was just going like. There's an alien just popping up with an eye looking out.
If I had some food, my cat would be right. He would be right here.
No worries, Duncan. Let's go off with your question.
It's directed at Tony. You've mentioned in previous interviews, and I think it was including the interview you did with the Chronicle Chamber guys, that you have a concept for the transition of the 21st Phantom to one of the twins, but from the 21st Phantom to the 22nd Phantom. Do you have a particular story about the 21st that you have to tell about the 21st before that transition happens, that it wouldn't work with any other Phantom?
Well, I've known for a long time how the 21st Phantom dies, how he comes to the end of his run. What's going on in the current story is that you'll see how that happens. It doesn't happen in a present that's evolving in his life. Although, a lot of readers may have missed that transition. Maybe it was a month ago where, they might think he was ignoring Maz and he was riding off for the prison. In fact, he's hearing Maz spin this tale. So that was the kind of the narrative device I wanted to use to finally get on the record how the 21st Phantom dies. As far as the transition, I mean, I really don't know who the 22nd Phantom is. I haven't thought that far ahead, but we've talked a little bit about the fact that anything can happen in the publishing business at any time. So I always think, time is short. We need to get on the record how this particular Phantom's life ends, even if it's not ending in the real time of the strip. So beyond that, I would say I've known for probably 10 years how this happens, but I don't know what happens beyond that, whether it's Kit, whether it's Heloise. I would think it's very likely Kit. But the prophecy that Maz is talking about now says that it won't be Kit. And you'll see in this story how if this future evolves the way Maz says it will, you'll see that it can't be Kit. It's got to be, it's somebody else,
Now I'm fascinated,
Yeah.
I have a quick question for any of you guys that might know the answer. Has any Phantom ever just handed off the role to their son without dying first? Has he just retired?
Yes, in a Phantom End story. It was called The Ghost Who Died Twice. So what it was is he was injured, lost an arm and his eyesight, and so he actually passed it off to the next Phantom, and then he died a year later. But apart from that, no.
It seems Dan's not here. I'll say it. That doesn't count because
I would like once I would like to interrupt in this, but in that story, wasn't it he actually his son was only a Phantom just because he had to wear the clothes and look as the Phantom? He did not give his rings up yet, so he was still technically the Phantom, right? In that story,
he gave one of the rings.
He did not give the skull ring back because he said that as long as he's alive, he has to keep the skull ring. It's only when he dies, he kills the guy, and then he gives this ring back. That's officially how he becomes the Phantom. Till then, he was just like the Phantom, like the figure for the Bandar and everybody else in that story. I remember it kind of distinctly because I'm a Hans Lindahl fan. So he was still not the Phantom technically in it.
Oh, well,
He started an international fight.
Yeah.
Damn Team Phantomin.
So simplistically, it's a non-canonical story, so no is the answer.
Well, I do know who kills the Phantom. Tony DePaul.
Damn, fellas.
You heard it here first. That's the guy that kills the Phantom.
But thank you for that answer, Tony, because it's been on the tip of our tongues for a while. So that's we really appreciate it. And while I still got the mic, I just wanted to say to all three of you, you've indicated several times during the conversation tonight how much effort and devotion you all put into your work on the Phantom, and the output that you're producing is nothing short of terrific, and seems to be prolific. The Phantom has a long history of talented people giving their passion and their talent to it, and it's also it's taken its toll on some of the creators as well, because of the demand that it puts on them in their lives, whether they've transition to something else because of the pressure, or whether that's impacted on their health. And so because you're working on a character that we all care about, by extension, we all care about the three of you as well. So I just implore you to pace yourselves. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and to all look after yourselves. But thank you very much for the work that you do.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just for the record, the Phantom's the cushiest job I've ever had. I don't feel any pressure at all. It's great.
That's awesome. So any other comments or anything else? Otherwise, we'll go to the Patreon draw. We all appreciate basically you donating, your money and stuff like that, which helps us basically run the website and everything like that, which basically means we don't have to ask our wife for extra money to be able to pay the bills. So basically, for those who've come in late, every season, so we're now going into spring for Australia and autumn for above the equator. Everyone who donates, you get $1 entry, and then there's a prize. And Jeff has donated that he will be supplying the prize this season. So thank you, Jeff, for that.
You're welcome.
So basically,
I didn't get very far with the prize here today while we were talking, but I got a little start on it. So.
Awesome. And then obviously we'll sort out, the Chronicle Chamber will pay for the postage as well to whoever is the winner. So if you are the winner, we will be in contact to organise to be able to organise your postal address. And if you don't want it, just let us know, because I will have it all, and I'm sure there'll be heaps of others that will want it as well. So without any further ado, let's press the start button and let's see who wins it. There we go. Mark Payne is the winner. So Mark, we'll be in touch with you. Congratulations for winning this amazing prize. And again, thank you, Jeff. So I'll just stop the sharing. So Tony, Jeff, Mike, really appreciate you guys giving us your Saturday morning for us. I know it was an early start for you guys. I appreciate working with us for all your work, joining us for our 200th podcast. Stephen, mate, it's been 200, eh? It's been a blast. What do you reckon?
Oh, it's phenomenal. Who ever thought that reading comics meant that you could always hang out with, like-minded people? And actually, the best thing that I love about the podcast is getting to chat with creators. It's not only fans, but creators as well. It's my favorite part of the whole thing.
Yeah. Just chatting with the fans and, I guess creating friendships with them, but also, the creators, the fans and everything else. It's, it's the best part about it is the friendships and stuff like that.
I never thought as a kid when I was reading it in the paper or reading it in a comic that I'd actually be able to, talk with Tony or whoever the artists or the writers were of this, of my favorite hero. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking with you guys. I got close to some of you in Australia a couple of years ago, and others from Facebook, and it just feels like you're friends now. So thanks to all you guys who I already know, and thanks to you guys who I'm just being introduced to today.
Yeah. It's fun to be involved in something that so many people take joy out of.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not very tech savvy, so sorry I burned a little bit of time up front trying to figure out Zoom. But now I know which buttons to press. So next time.
Yeah. I think we originally sold this to you that it will be an hour, and I think we're into 2.5 hours. So,
we didn't take that seriously anyway.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Neither did we.
Yeah. Just tell them it'll be an hour, right?
That's why Paul knew he had no worries coming in 2 hours in. He'd be fine.
Yeah.
So thank you, listeners. Thank you, Patreons. Thank you, Jeff, Tony, and Mike, for joining us. As always, our website is chroniclechamber.com. Our email is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. You can subscribe to us on iTunes or Spotify, or the various apps like Podbean, Player FM, Castbox, Listen Notes, or you can watch us on YouTube. And if you are watching us or listening to us, make sure you drop us a message, a star rating as well. And if you have any questions that didn't get asked, put them in the comments and we'll see if we can get them answered for you. From myself, happy Phantoming.
Happy Phantoming.
Thank you all. Great to see you.
Thanks for being here. That was great fun.
Yeah.
And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die. The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom. Enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds you.